Guten Abend, good evening everyone, a warm welcome to the Architekturzentrum Wien, the Austrian Architecture Museum. Welcome to this 12th edition already of our series IBA Wien Meets Architects. Tonight with a lecture of the fabulous Barcelona-based office Flores Prats Arquitectes. Since 2017, the Architekturzentrum Wien and the IBA Wien have been inviting international architects who are breaking new ground in their projects. Among them were the Pritzker Prize winners Lakato Vasal and Olsa Sejima, as well as Anna Parmakundu, Lan, Dorte Mandrup, and L Architects, and many more. As a contribution to the IBA Wien theme of social housing, the editions have been dedicated to topics such as relating housing to the urban level or how to deal with the post-war housing estates. This year, our series reflects on housing and social cultural infrastructure. Vienna is among the fastest growing cities in Europe. Where do the extensive and rapid developments leave space for social and cultural infrastructure? And what might these look like? In Red Vienna, more than 100 years ago, cultural infrastructures were an integral part of the planning of new residential areas. How can this experience be transferred into the 21st century? So this is one of the many questions we have this year. Which architectures enable good coexistence in the city today? And this leads me directly to Flores Prats. I was probably not the only one who felt this way a few years ago in 2018 at the Venice Biennale. I was completely thrilled by the Sala Beckett, both by the project and by the presentation. And when I later visited the project in real life, I was even more thrilled. This cultural and social project in Barcelona is a conversion of a social and cultural infrastructure from the 1920s, so at the same time as Red Vienna. As in former times, now again, the building provides space for culture and for the neighbors, and it is closely linked to the social memory of the neighborhood. The material conversion is absolutely stunning. Existing structural components were studied, interpreted, and redeployed in the design. And this results, on the one hand, in a fine precision work, on the other hand, in a really playful experimentation. And the conversion process was both economical in terms of resources and cost. I think we can learn a lot from this project and from many other projects by Flores Prats, including social housing and public spaces. And the mutual learning and the knowledge transfer is, after all, the idea of this series. This is why we work with the format of Respondenz to create a dialogue between the different contexts, and I'm very pleased that Wilfried Kühn will be taking on this part today. I will introduce both Flores Prats and Wilfried Kühn in a minute, but first I would like to invite Kurt Hofstetter from the IBA Wien, our partner for this series, and thank him again for this continuing and very inspiring cooperation.
Yeah, thank you, Angelika. As you said, it's the 12th time that we can work together as IBA Vienna and Architekturzentrum Vienna. And of course, 12 is a special number. So it's the last time before next year we will go into our year of presentation. We will keep on working together, of course, but things will change, and you will see the results of a process that has been going on for 6 years now. And when I'm looking now back at these 6 years, I keep catching myself thinking, if we would start again, we would make it completely different. And even on the same topic of new social housing. Not just because we would like to make it different, but because we would need to make it different. The times are changing so quickly, and just the whole processes that we are involved in need to always go further, and while you're working, you're already late and behind. That's interesting. At the same time, we have to understand that development processes take their time, and that they are not bad just because new knowledge has become available. On the contrary, I think this must spur us on even more to complete the developments that have already been started with the utmost care and attention to detail. Because only with the experience we have gained, we can bring about actual improvements into the future. So today's example of Flores Prats in the IBA Meets Architect series will show us in an impressive way how this care and attention to detail can lead to very astonishing and new results when it goes hand in hand with creativity and with a lot of love for the existing. Perhaps we are witnessing a very special aspect of what we call circular economy. It's about the taking care of the ghosts. So thank you very much that you are here. And I'm very much looking forward to your presentation.
Let me now briefly introduce our key speakers for tonight, Flores Prats. It's an architectural studio founded by Eva Prats and Ricardo Flores in Barcelona in 1998, dedicated to the confrontation of theory and academic practice with design and construction activity. They have worked in rehabilitation of old structures for new occupations, in the design of public spaces with neighbors' participation, as well as in social housing and their capacity to create community. The office has also experimented with the use of film or with exhibitions. The work of Flores Prats obtained, among others, the Grand Award in Architecture at the Royal Academy of Arts in London, the City of Barcelona Award, and many more. They have been nominated for the Mies van der Rohe Awards in several occasions and exhibited in the last 4 editions of the Biennale in Venice. Eva and Ricardo are both professors at they are still in Barcelona also, did I get that right? At the ETSA in Barcelona, at the RMIT in Melbourne, and at the ETH in Zurich. In 2014, the Mexican editorial Arquine, I think that's the right one, not Arquine, publishes the first monograph on their work, which you should really get. The title is Thought by Hand. It's a beautiful book, The Architecture of Flores Prats. And there's also a recent book, a very recent one, dedicated specifically to the Sala Beckett, the project I was talking about in the beginning in my introduction. You should, of course, also get that one. But now, first, give a warm welcome to Eva and Ricardo.
Thank you, Angelica and Kurt, for this nice introduction and for inviting us to be in Vienna today. I think it's the first talk, presential since a long time. So thank you for coming. And yes, today we will talk. We will go through 3 projects of our studio that they address. One address public space as an extension of the private world into the public domain. Then we will talk briefly about collective housing and its capacity to create community, and then about adaptive reuse and the recuperation of existing structures to host new programs. All of them are projects that take care of people or take care of existing buildings, and all of them share the interest for shaping networks of human relationships that can hold together people from different ages, cultures, economies, and with time build a community among them. So, we have been involved in projects with neighbors' participation, and we have enjoyed these processes because of the amount of information from people who experience the place can give you, so you can work the program with them. This is the family that runs the candy kiosk that were part of this group of neighbors that followed during 6 months the evolution of the project, and also then later during the construction. Eduardo was another one. Now he is seated in the hula hoop that we built around some of the trees, and is a young friend he has in the neighborhood. And also the technicians in the municipality and politicians were involved in all the process, from the very first meeting until the completion, that it's when these pictures are taken for a reportage in the magazine. This building is, this square is in the edge of Barcelona. It's in an area where the city, kind of the dense city stop, and then you have this horizon, and one of the river, that is the limit of Barcelona, Besòs, crosses in front. And we were impressed by this big building, but its form, or it's built by very small houses, small in square meters and also in height. And even our commission was about the public space, and we were drawing also this pergola, but we were all the time kind of referring to the connection in between, or the complementary between the houses and the public space. We couldn't stop thinking on the houses. Also because the first days walking in the area, we have the feeling in this neighborhood that we were all the time in the backside of the buildings. Because if you can see here, the ground floor level is the same height of the housing levels, and the shops cannot expand outside or bring some atmosphere of their activity into the street. That's also why, this is also why this kiosk of candy was so important for us, to bring new energy into the place, no? And to kind of extend the entrance of the houses that are in this gray band into this area. So we got a lot of information from the neighbors also that there was a problem of drugs in the area, so they didn't want any bushes. All the vegetation should be uplifted. And also, we knew that the square was not like this at the beginning. It was another shape, and it was separated from the building. But people use it regularly, so they take it as an extension of their houses. And the neighbors wanted the older people could be more near to the houses, and then to leave the kids playing and running at the other side. So also this pergola that we wanted to move around kind of separated or divided the two areas. We were interested in this pergola, in this element in the public space, also as an element that will reduce the height of this very tall building and kind of protect you or organize, helping us to organize something on the ground, on this common ground. But the interesting thing was this complementary between houses and public space, that later when a commission came through a competition on building a house for 111 units, that was a lot for us, thinking how we can organize them to shape a common space. Maybe we were thinking of a common vestibule, like this is what we are drawing here, thinking that, okay, you will have your house, and I point, you will have this, we were drawing the entrance of one of the apartments, but how you continue with the staircase that you share with the neighbor. You arrive down into the square, you open the door, you find there is a fountain, there are some trees that you can follow how they grow and how they change during the seasons. So we were very much interested in building this platform kind of relationships among neighbors, where they can greet in the morning, or coming out or coming in, and little by little you know the faces, and you know who lives next to you. This courtyard, this kind of open-air vestibule, is part of a huge city block. The perimeter of this building is defined by a master plan by Manuel Solà Morales. It's in a city 50 kilometers from Barcelona, Terrassa. And the interesting thing is that Manuel Solà Morales was defining the edge of the city, how the city will meet the landscape. He had this master plan quite organized when he made a call and opened a competition to select some teams to work with them to end up the definition of this master plan while developing each one of these blocks. So there were regular meetings on the municipality and deciding where are you entering, how you organize the entrance door, what will you do with this central area. As you can see here is a model by Solà Morales, but this could be privatized, and our team, we wanted to make it kind of this common space also because we were building in the edge of the city. And so when you approach home, you will leave the city in your back. And we were thinking, okay, this can be a winter afternoon, kind of a solitary moment that you go home and then you're facing only the landscape, crossing through this forest. So we thought it would be very important to have a kind of not to go straight into the staircase, go into a first space that will have an intermediate scale between the landscape and the house, and the tiny house, or the small house that you live. And this is what we were organizing. This space that works as a vestibule, and that you can start, meeting someone or listening to some noises. But also, of course, we were kind of also concerned about the size of this courtyard or this vestibule that we were proposing, and we thought that might be some space in the old town Barcelona that we can go and measure, and I think that to have an idea of how this space will be. We were afraid that it would become too small and kind of promiscuous between neighbors. There is the San Felipe Neri, is a square next to the cathedral. Maybe if you've been to Barcelona, you know it. It's used as a playground for a school, kindergarten that is nearby, but it's a space that is it's great if you go with a group of friends, or you are 5 or 6. It looks like a private room, open air, but also there can be other people in the square and you don't bother each other. Then we thought it was a great space. Also, it gave us clues of which kind of tree we could plant in the shadow, because the old town is very dense and it's full of shadow. There was a fountain also. We draw it, we draw the plan of it, and we compare the silhouette of this square with the silhouette of the vestibule in building 111, in this building. So the fine line, this is San Felipe Neri, the square with the fountain. And we placed the fountain where we wanted to have our fountain. And the size is kind of similar. So this was okay in plan. We needed to know what happens with the height of it, the proportion of the space. So also we measure it in height and we overlap the two. So this was kind of quiet, when it's not yet built and you're very much concerned about the size of things, not to know why, about this proximity among neighbors. So it gives us kind of a clue of a possible dimension. In this square, the square is quite open, or the patio is very open, but you can kind of go in recess, or you go into a much more shadow area, these chambers, when getting to your staircase. That's what you see here. So we're interested in making this excavation of these spaces where you can more quietly take out your key and open the door of your apartment and not be so much exposed in this central space that it's very much like, we were thinking like a theater. We're thinking on the plan of Teatro Olimpico in Vicenza by Andrea Palladio, that in the scene you have it's built, the scene of a city, and how these encounters among the actors, when one comes from one street, the other from the other, and they meet here right in the corner, and they start talking, and the play starts. This is what will happen in this courtyard also. You go out into your staircase, you wait if you don't want to say hello, or you go into this other space that it's more lit, and it's where all these relations start being built. And how the houses relate to this void, because every house has this kind of private space, but that participate of this void with this terrace. And all the terraces are around this courtyard. And then all the social life of the house happens around this courtyard. So the kitchen, the dining room, and we live for the facades, for the street facades that are quiet, the rooms. We just closed one room and we left one open. So they have the diagonal of the apartment outside, and you can close it in case you need 2 bedrooms. And then thinking on getting into the apartment, also we're concerned on how much you work at home, all the cyclical works of the house. We thought about also the people who will come to live here, they will not have for sure any help on the domestic issues. So we were thinking, okay, let's place all the electric appliances in the center of the house, and let's try to organize kind of a furniture with all the fridge, the washing machine, the kitchen, and so that everyone knows or see what's going on, who's doing what, and you can offer your help, or maybe the person who's doing it can ask you for help with it. So this is the furniture doesn't touch the ceiling, but it looks like the rest of the wall, so it's very discreet, but it liberates all this space to make these actions around it. And you can see the diagonal of the apartment here with the other bedroom that it's not closed. It can be like a studio. Meanwhile, and we were interested in having even the apartment, it's not very big. It's 55, 60 square meters. But you can have this area that you can organize a big birthday, dinner, or whatever you want, but you have enough space. We, after finishing it, after 1 year of the building being completed and being inhabited, we were concerned about how all this had been accepted by the inhabitants. And we were teaching in a master program on housing. And we invite the students, what about if we go there and we ask a few things about the apartment and also about the courtyard. So we organize, first thing, we organize breakfast on Saturday morning. We invite neighbors and students to meet each other, and then they make appointments, where they can go into the place and to their houses and ask them about one question was also about the kitchen, how it works, because in Spain it's very common that the kitchens are still closed. So, and for this lady it was okay because she can cook and still look at take care, watch the kids, what they are doing. For this lady, it was not acceptable at all. The kitchen should be closed for sure, but the same generation, for this lady, it worked because she can keep talking with the friends and keep cooking. Some questions also concern about the courtyard. There were many questions, but one also we work, okay, how this has been working, if the people know each other. We realized that there were a lot of young people renting the higher apartments, and they like to say hello between each other from balcony to balcony. Some neighbors didn't like it, but they call it radio patio, and they used to kind of talk a little bit. Downstairs, there was mainly families and some people living alone that take some of the smaller apartments, like it's the case of Marta. And Marta gave us a very personal comment on her first year in the building that I would like to share with you now.
Tenia moltes ganes de fer-me jo el meu pis, el meu racó. I doncs des que vaig veure aquest pis, vaig veure 5, i vaig dir, aquest és el meu. Perquè ja de seguida que el vaig veure el vaig decorar de seguida així. I bé, doncs ja porto un any. Ara vull fer algun canvi, vull pintar alguna paret d'aquí de l'habitació. Aquí quan surts al balcó no et sentiràs sola, jo estava molt sola, perquè el meu fill se'l va quedar el meu marit i no volia que em veiés. Llavors vaig estar 9 mesos sola. I ho vaig passar bastant malament, però gràcies als veïns, tinc la Laura i la Isa, que són les primeres que van venir, doncs jo m'he sentit molt acollida i no m'he sentit tan sola. El primer any, la nit de final d'any, que jo vaig passar aquí la primera, jo estava sola. I llavors una veïna de davant va veure llum i va venir a buscar-me i dir, no, tu no em menjaràs el raïm sola. Ah, estem nosaltres aquí. I bueno, això m'omple molt i si estic malalta les truco, una té les claus i venen i si m'han d'anar a comprar o el que sigui, no? O sigui, em trobo molt bé. Una de carrera.
Okay, so Magda's comments were very strong for us, and in seeing how really architecture can help in building a community between people of different backgrounds and different social conditions and situations. And that was very, very important for us, and seeing how the building could help them to meet and to relay in each other. There are other communities that we've been working with that had more to do with time, with different times of the places that we were working with, of the accumulation of time, of different lives in different moments. And this is the case of Sala Beckett, which is an adaptive reuse of a former cooperative, workers' cooperative in Barcelona. The Sala Beckett company, a group, is a drama center that existed before the Sala Beckett project that we did. They were very successful in Barcelona for 20 years already. But then at a certain moment, this man, which is Tony, the director, they ended up without a headquarter for some reason, and then he called the administration to help them to find a new home for them. And it was this space that was a former cooperative, as I said, from 1924, that had been very successful in this neighborhood, and was in the 20th century a place for meeting, for all the workers around. And it bankrupted as many other cooperatives in Barcelona in the 1980s. And then in the moment of the competition, it was 2011, it had been abandoned. In the meantime, it had been other possible occupations or tests for occupying it, but it was mainly in a very bad state. The cooperative was a very useful place for neighbors to meet and socialize. It was upstairs. It was a place for leisure. Had a cafe, a theater space also for dancing, for celebrations. Downstairs was a grocery store for selling goods that also had for them for helping them for incomes. So, but the interesting thing of the structure was very industrial structure-like, because also was in an industrial area of Barcelona. And if you see, the heights are very generous, are 6 meters of height, very unusual also for Barcelona. If you know, it was not for an industrial area. The width of the spaces without columns in the upstairs was like 10, 11 meters without pillars because of the trusses. So they were very generous spaces, but they were not connected. See that the floor slab between ground floor, the grocery, and upstairs were independent units. You had this staircase in the center that you can see in the model going up to the celebration area, let's say, and downstairs all the grocery store was around, but it was not connected. Upstairs, this is the cafe. See, the space was very wide, very open, beautifully decorated with tiles and the doors and molds and moldings and things like that. Ground floor was a grocery store with beautiful also pavement, beautiful ham hanging there. It was a treasure, a paradise, a place. Look at the cans in the corner, very beautifully decorated also as a selling place. But as I said, in the meantime, between the bankrupt of the cooperative and the moment of the competition, there were some tests of doing something there, especially in the ground floor. It was a gym, a sauna gym tested there, which this same space was like that when we entered in the competition, was absolutely erased. Nothing about the grocery store and everything in the ground floor was left. All the decoration was not interested for them, was not interesting for their activity, so they blocked all the windows, they took all the tiles, all the moldings, all the decorations away. And it was this kind of very, it was a kind of time, in this case, covering the memories, or new mezzanine spaces, who know for what. Nobody wants to know. Anyway, the pool, etc. Very, kind of a very sad place to be. But upstairs, still, when you would come up somehow, you would find the remains of the old theater, all the cooperative places. So you had this stage, and there we could see how things have gone. This ray of light, like in a way forgotten in the middle of the stage, was like waiting for someone to rescue and to bring it forward. For us, it was obvious in the competition that we had to count on that. The building was not listed, was not protected, so in the competition you could demolish it. You could decide to demolish it or not. So the director was saying, look, I like the building. When he presented the competition, I like the building, but it's up to you if you keep it or not, because I want a place that, of course, is contemporary theater. It has to be, all the conditioning of acoustics and, silence. We are a theater of silence, of war. It's not about, orchestras and all that. So it has to work very well climatically, and you decide. So deciding to keep this ruin in going forward with the competition is already, is the first point, is the basic decision to do, because you are risking. But for us, it was so full of memories, and of all the memories of the neighbors that were still around, that were waiting to see what was going on with that building. It's almost decaying, it's almost ruined, it's in a very bad state, but we are all waiting for that, because there's a lot of generations there that we lived that place. And there are people who were alive, neighbors that have lived in that cooperative or actively done things. So we proposed to keep that. And also it was very interesting for us that the ruin, in this case, would be part of the future of Sala Beckett. Not just to keep it as something, not to touch it, but to be part of the future activities. Because all these lives that are written in those walls are actively very important for the activity of writing theater, because people who go there are young playwrights or students of theater, need to write plays, and they look around, and when they see all these ghosts that are layered in the walls, they are already imagining, and they are helping them to create their place. So what the first thing we did was to think, okay, let's try to keep everything that is still there and remain and was saved from the time, and let's try to rescue it and reuse it somehow in the building. So we started a 3 months survey of everything that had been saved, doors and windows and roses and lamps and staircase and everything, and tiles, of course, in an immense inventory of more than 100 plans, big plans, drawing every detail, everything that was there, to keep it and to bring it to our office and see how we can count on that. So all the doors and windows and everything that we had, of course, later as a model, we were thinking, how can we use them? Doors were done, all of them are different. We think because they were done with a lot of time, the building, the carpenter have been thinking differently each week in doing every different door, and that for us was very useful because you see some of them are very important and they are more for the vestibule. Some of them are more humble, so you could bring them to the dressing rooms or toilets and so on. So they were helping us as characters to think on them, where we could place them again to be useful for the future program of the drama center that we had to deal with. Some of them had remains on paintings and things of what they were. At the end of the story, we did a little video that I want to show you now of how things were in our heads, moving in a way, trying to go from one place to another of the building, in the same floor, in another wall, etc., depending on what they wanted to be. So this video shows, you will see the 2 plans. So this is existing in the upstairs, of course, because downstairs there was nothing, as I said, and the upstairs of the proposal. Some of the things remain, for example, in the facade, of course, and some on the windows mainly, but some of them were moving because, the organization of the spaces have changed. Now the rooms have changed for theater, classes. Some of the staircase in the former cafe went to the classes area as well. They were flying and landing in another place, sometimes in the same floor, but in a different position. Sometimes they were color changed because when they were landing, the walls were different, so they were somehow, contaminated by this color situation and changed color. And then in the ground floor, that we had nothing, there were a few left, so we moved them down downstairs to for example, 2 of the coffee that were left went down to the bar, the new bar that is in the corner. Some of the former dressing rooms of the actors went into the dressing room of the ground floor. Some of the ones with glass went into the public toilets to give light to the vestibule, and so on. So they were depending on the qualities or the character of each of the elements. We were thinking, this could be very useful here or there. Again, sometimes they were transformed because when they were arriving, the space was much more grand, or etc. So some of them had additions, and that was a bit the story. But it was for us, at a certain point, they were like floating, or it's like if you were throwing them in the air, and they were arriving somewhere else, differently from when they were originally. The colors changing. It was a very, very, complicated but very, very interesting process to go through. So this film, you can see now the characters, how you can see they are all different, and they are, seem like, but and all the lattice also helps a lot, because the lattice also, frames the views, so they are really, with the colors and that, they became characters of our story here. So this is the story of the doors, but everything like that happened similar with many other elements. And then, if the program is, the ground floor is a more public part of the project. See, you enter in the vestibule. To the right, you have the box office, the sofa. You can wait friends in the red sofa, or you queue for the play in the ground floor level. Upstairs is more formative and more experimental area, but then the vestibule connects the two floors. See, in the left, you have the existing gym state of the asphalt, what we found, all kind of destroyed, but with some dressing, showers and all that. And to the right is the project. The project has, the corner is the most public part. So you have this bar restaurant, which invites the neighborhood to enter. Even if you are not interested in theater activity, you can enter because you like the omelette of the bar, which is quite good. And then you stay there, and then suddenly you can go into the toilets or the vestibule you realize of a play, and then you can be in the activities, but otherwise you cannot. So it's something in between. You can be there and not really necessarily being part of the activities of the building. The bar and the restaurant is connected to the vestibule, so if you enter in the box office to pick up your tickets to the left is all the offices are at sight of everyone who comes in. You pick up your tickets, you wait in the sofa, or you go to the bar. So all this corner is public. In the meantime, the left part of the plan is where the actors enter. The actors don't want to meet public because they are very superstitious, So beforehand, they don't want to see them. So they go very, very discreetly. They say hello to the offices, to the administrative, and they go to the dressing rooms to, rehearse again and again. And they meet at the end in the big hall, which is in the upper part of the plan. This is the only part, the theater space is the only part done new out of the existing structure, because Sala Beckett needed a very wide space to change the position of the seats and the scene. So here you have in the front of the picture, you have dressing rooms on the ground floor, dressing rooms in the mezzanine. These dressing rooms in the mezzanine, which are here, they go to the former theater with this connection that we did in the back part of the stage. Talking about the stage here have been removed by suggestion of Sala Beckett, because they wanted to have all in one plan, and then being able to move actors and an audience as they wanted. So see, if this was the existing situation with the floor dividing, now the vestibule is the thing that connects, the space where it connects with some help of the light and the circulation, the two spaces. So the vestibule is a common space of a new house, a kind of a whole house that now works in common. So see, the upper level this is what we found with the former theater, the cafe, some classroom for the kids of the workers, and the dressing rooms for the theater connecting, blocking. This was another unity done a bit later. So now the vestibule connects it all. So you go up with the help of, the light, and you're in the center. You mix with the people which is entering into the theater, or this becomes a rehearsal room, and this is classes for taking, for learning to write or to speak, etc. in theater. So the vestibule is the one who is linking upstairs, downstairs, and upstairs, and all the way until the back part. I want to show you another video which speaks about these different circulations, because the actors have these circulations I talked to you about, while the normal public is moving in the center. They don't see the actors, and also there's technicians. So there's 2-3 circulations, which also was a big challenge to work with, how not to make them cross, but it's the most fascinating thing in a theater. I will show you now. See, the actor is coming very, very discreetly there. He hides. He doesn't want to be seen. See, he's hiding. So the public, you enter there, you pick up your tickets, and you go and wait, in the bar or. You can go to the sofa as well. This sofa is interesting because it's behind the dressing rooms. So the actor is going there to the dressing room to rehearse and to practice and concentrate. In the meantime, people is having fun in the other side of this wall. So in the one side, people is enjoying, the other side, people is panicking. But it's this wall with double life. And then it's interesting because then they meet at the end of the plan. No? But this time today, we have play in the upstairs theater. So you go up in this staircase, you can meet students and professors and directors. So it's a place where everyone really can really meet and interact. So you queue there, and the actor is coming from this space we stay in the backstage, hidden. And then the third part comes, which is the technician, of course, a key part of the lecture, in this case, of the play, and the control cabin. So see, for example, in this play, see how the seats are really, every time a new director comes, every 15 days or 3 weeks, they change all the organization between public and actors. It's a lot of proximity between the actor and the public. It's a very close audience. This is something Sala Beckett wants a lot. And also what happens a lot is when everything ends, unlike at the beginning, then you meet everyone in the lobby or in the bar, and then you can say, of course, how was, you were great, you think so, yes, and all these kind of things. There's no hierarchy in Sala Beckett. Even with the technicians, you meet, and then you end up smoking in the balcony all together, and that's all fine. No? So this is the thing. So when but the thing is, when the construction comes, the builder comes, the bulldozer comes, and so all this delicacy, all this inventory and all that is really a weak element, because you start to take everything away. You take all the doors and windows and tiles and everything that you want to save. The building gets very fragile. If it was in a ruin beforehand, it's like if you're making it more ruinous in a way. Moving forward a ruin. Sometimes you wouldn't know if the building would survive or not, would stay there or not. See how, when everything comes away, how things are really unrecognizable. But then all the tiles are saved, are numbered, and in pallets and moved to storage. Some of them are broken, 10 to 15% are broken, but many of them were saved to make the structure to reinforce the floor slab structurally, but also acoustically. So we had everything was away, and then we started to reinforce for not only for acoustic, but also for fire regulations. In the meantime, downstairs, the pool was gone. We were making room for the big sala, the downstairs theater. Some of the walls, as I said, the left one that you see here had to be removed because we needed this kind of space, 15 meters of width, to have space of audience, stage and audience, and this needed a minimum of 15, so we had this portico structure. But then you could do all these kind of settings if you wanted. Frontal, two sides in another way, 4 sides, and so on. So Sala Beckett needed all this capacity of moving things around. This is the downstairs theater. Upstairs, the space was left almost as it was. The light that we found there in these 3 windows in the back, we kept it to have possibility of having place within daylight. But the floor was changed. This floor, wooden floor, is because they wanted to nail some things sometimes and also to work many hours, etc. They didn't want the tiles, not because they didn't like it, but because it's much more possible to work with the wood. So here you have the floor slab in concrete for the acoustics, then all the layers of the wood. And this is what happened you can see in the drawing. In the left, you have the tiles of the existing with the former theater, the former cafe, the classrooms of the kids. These tiles here went to the vestibule. These tiles of the kids went into this place because these 2 spaces are also wood. And this part here went downstairs because, as I said, nothing in the ground floor was left. So we needed some tiles for the bar and the vestibule. And so all this part here went down. But see how then we had to, some of the drawings were drawn differently for the new situation. So after saving them, all of them, they were inventorized, and we could start to think how you turn a corner, how you make all these bands, how you make them work, and eventually make them curves if they need it because of the sofas and so on. So all this work of reusing them, the tiles are tiles again, the doors are doors again. Nothing is, it's a decoration. They are being useful again, but they are in a different position or a different condition. So the carpenters were working in repairing them when they were rotting parts, extending sometimes in width or height, or cutting them, adapting them. Some of them, this window, for example, you see it here, it was 2 meter height. It was super high, but when it arrived to the vestibule, it was little. So we had to add something to accompany it, but then painting it again, not to make evidence so much of your work, because for us it was very important that when somebody would enter now, would not be attracted by so many effort that you do to recuperate things. So the eye is not distracted by so many details and accidents, but the eye is going through the space and even not taking in account of your work. So the painting unified a lot the old and the new as well, to make it part of the new times of the space.
So in the vestibule, as you have seen, there is some light coming from above. Maybe in the model is more clear. And this is the vestibule is the space that we kind of modify more how it works. As Ricardo has explained, it was completely separated. One program was the grocery, the other one was leisure. And here, the director wanted that as soon as you enter into the building, you enter into a big house, that it shouldn't be kind of solemn or imposing. So as soon as you enter from the street, 3 steps, and you see there's something coming up, and you can hear voices of people. Maybe you don't see them, but when you arrive home sometimes, there's people doing things already in the building from early morning. And these skylights that you have seen, these handrails are the skylights that bring more light into the vestibule on the ground floor. In the first floor level, it's a little bit more private, but we also have the green door. There is the theater upstairs. So for some hours, it's a quiet space that some students use to read there or rehearsal. Also, it's a moment that in between classes, some of the teachers can meet and stay there. And in the afternoon at 8, when the play starts, there is a play going downstairs, another one upstairs, and it's the moment that you cross. There is students, public, teachers crossing each other. And in the vestibule, it's very easy to cross. As you can see, there is people coming up from here. So you move this wall on one side or the other, and you cross into people doing different things inside the building. But the interesting thing is that the vestibule kind of links all the different actions that take place here. There are formation, there is also rooms for creation, and there is this exhibition. And the interesting thing, and what we were talking with the director, is how to provide this mixing, but also to have spaces that you can provide kind of intimacy or concentration for the moments of that they are doing the classes. So in the building now, there are all these traces of people of Salabeke that are occupying it, and the new halls and the new circulation has been drawn and broken on the walls. But there are also these traces of the cooperative and also the years of abandonness. You can see it on the walls. And these are all different chapters of the life of the building that kind of coincide here in the walls without any kind of hierarchy. So we were invited for the Venice Biennale that Grafton curated, called Free Space. The architects wanted to talk about this kind of the generosity of architecture, or things that the architect provides, that it's not in the program, that's programless things that you provide. And then they also wanted to be an experiential exhibition. So we thought about, what about if we bring this skylight in the center of Salabeke and we make it work with the Venice light, and we build it one-to-one inside this huge building of Arsenale that is like 6 meters high, more or less the same height of this building of Salabeke, so it almost doesn't fit there. Here in the photograph, the camera, it seems that it's a symmetrical building it's symmetrical in plan, but not because of the natural light. This old engraver is more clear about this. There is the south windows that you can get a lot of light. The north ones are not that good. So we were interested in having these south windows of the Arsenale and get all the sun that we could get from the 3 windows that we were given, but we will use 2 of them to make a funnel of light and concentrate the light to here. The 3rd one, we will use it to lead some of the exhibition of models. You can see in the axonometric how it works. So it's an installation that has 2 different sides. One is very much a scenography, and you can see the one-to-one replica of Salabeke skylight, and on the back, there will be the context of what is this skylight that you are seeing on the other side. So here there will be a display of the work of the architect during these years of collaboration with Salabeke people. In the model, you can see how all the light gets concentrated into the white wall. So it trespasses from the windows here. We wanted not to lose here in the model. It seems you are losing some light here, but we didn't in reality. But it's difficult. The difficulty was that in Sala Vecchia, you have the light coming from above. So it's more a shower, and it's stronger. In Venice, we were dealing with horizontal light, that it's not that strong. So that's why we needed to concentrate two windows into it. Everything gets built in Barcelona. You test it in the carpenter. We had to look for a carpenter that had a very big, you see, warehouse. And once it's kind of tested here, it can travel. At the same time, in our studio, we were collecting things on Sala Vecchia that were in different rooms of the studio and putting all them in one room, the biggest room in the studio, but you can see that we couldn't, there was a moment that we couldn't move this archive without stepping into some of the models. So we asked a friend, well, a carpenter, who kind of built these shelves on the door and table to put all this process material in chronological order. And as you can see, we blocked the door of this room, so we had to go under this table to keep working here. This little model was helping us because this display area was higher than our room in Barcelona. But here it was like the last days. We have already organized, and we have this between this wall here and the other one on the other side. We had this 60 meters of display that we will have in Venice, and everything that we had to travel with was in order here. And then at the other side of this room, in the studio, in the corridor, we were working on the models, and with an industrial designer, a friend of ours, was making all these legs for these models to be able to stand up and be in a height to look at them. We were preparing some of these containers to travel. It's a way also that we archive the models in our studio. Because it's easy, because then it's easy because then you can open it.
Eva is there. She doesn't want to talk because she's there. Okay, but the containers, yeah, they are already prepared for the exhibition. So when they open up, they show what's inside, almost without any, specific. So they travel, and they are already prepared for the show. So they have all the labels and the process and some parts that can be seen and compared and so on. So this is what happened. Then they all traveled there with all the models inside. We expanded because, luckily for us, when we arrived, the neighbors were not yet there. So we could, expand. Like if you have a big bed and you sleep like that, this is the same. So we have all these pieces and the models and all, and then we laid out very carefully the beginning. These three windows is what Eva was saying before. The two windows in the left will give light with a funnel, and the left, the other one with to a model. And the other side of these windows, very, that always happens in Venice. You don't know what's there, but suddenly this is beautiful canals of water, and very silent water, and the boats coming through, and the reflected light through. The three windows that we are talking about are those ones here, because this first part of the Arsenale has no natural light. Here you can see in the axonometrical drawing, this first 100 meters had no natural light because there's another building here. So we were given these first three windows with natural light for our installation. And at the same time, in the same Biennale, we were invited to participate in another pavilion, which was the Vatican Pavilion, curated by architect Francesco Dalcò, in an island called San Giorgio, which is behind the San Giorgio Maggiore church by Palladio. There's a beautiful garden, and he invited 10 offices to make a statement or a little chapel on a chapel in a forest, of course referring to the Asplund chapel in a forest in Sweden. So we were one of these 10 offices that were from all over the world. It was very interesting to see the different reactions to this subject from different hemispheres and continents. And we could choose a place where to put the chapel. So we asked to be, this is the San Giorgio, and then the cloisters, and then you have this long path. And before it's almost arriving to the lagoon again, we said, should we put it at the end of this path? So the chapel is almost, when you are touching the water again, is like a door, an invitation to get into this forest. This forest is an ancient forest of pine trees, very beautiful, very big. And the chapel is in the eastern part of this forest. So in a way, it's catching the sun of the eastern sun, the first sun in the morning that enters into the forest comes through this chapel, this oculus, big oculus. And so it's called, that's what it's called, the morning chapel. And here is the path, and you enter that. And the drawing that Eva is painting here is this drawing that in a way concentrates or synthesizes that idea of the sun, the chapel, and the forest, the three elements in one. So also we wanted that the element appear like in this very beautiful, the original engraving from Leonidov, which is a pavilion in a park from the early 20th century. We changed his pavilion by our chapel because we thought that would be very nice that you find suddenly the chapel in the middle of a forest, like if it was something that was already there, like a fragment of a ruin of something previous to our arrival, that we just found it there and we leave it open like a fragment of building already. So, but of course in Biennale everything is fake because you do it for 6 months, so all the ruin and everything is done by plasterwork and is inside is this metal structure, every seat is empty, and is a kind of a scenography again. So everything is built very flat, like a scenography. And at the end, you see here is an empty space, which contains air only. And when you prepare the door to go through, to enter the place, and in the same time, in the other side of our island or our world in that moment, in the Corderie, we were building this scenography, but this was a real scenography. We didn't want to hide that it was a scenography because you would come in the back and you would find all the process, all the world of the architect, all the imaginarium that we had through these 6 years of work with Salabeckett was there. In the moment when this structure was closed and the door was almost prepared for crossing through and the light well, also in the chapel was already fixed, was closed, was a volume, was not scenography anymore. It was something solid, you could cross through. And later on when we were drawing this, months later when we were drawing this situation plan, we realized that we were doing 2 times the same exercise without knowing, of course. We were drawing the same project 2 times because as in the Corderie you walk 100 meters and then suddenly you find a wall which is inclined with a door which is inviting you to come through, and when you come through you find something unexpected behind. In the same way you walk in the island of San Giorgio and then you find this wall and it's inclined and there's this door there which is inviting to go through, and behind you will find the chapel. So without realizing we're drawing 2 times the same thing, one directed to the Corderie, the huge beautiful Renaissance building, the other one to this beautiful centenary pine forest that we found there. These were our 2 sites. This was related to the lagoon, the reflected light of the lagoon coming through in the pines, a fantastic place, of course. And then you find the door, and then you say maybe I have to go through. And then when you go through, you find that the wall is not a wall. It's an excavated thing, it's inflated, it's eroded, and it's this space, open air, that has some steps and kind of an altar, little altar, inviting you in, and in that altar is some books or some image that invites you to go and see, and when you go closer, you start to see some drawings that in a way gives you some clues of why it is called the Morning Chapel and why it's located like that. And when you're looking at that, suddenly you realize that there's something above that you haven't seen before. And it's this drawing which gives you a bit more light on the whole pavilion, let's say. So this space is getting the light in the morning, the light at noon, and it's open air, it's unprotected. It's a fragment of a ruin in a way. You are exposed to the elements, the city's in the back, and you are with all this nature there. And you are not inspired by any symbol. There are not any symbol to the Catholic Church there. Your inspiration is in nature there. It's a place for reflection, for your own thoughts, and you are with the forest and the lagoon. And so open and unprotected, open air as this piece is, in the other side of the Biennale was this unprotected building as well. It was a fragment of a ruined building, only animated by the Venice's light. It was an authentic light, an original light, and the people who was moving through was animating that. But also in 2 times we were with this fragment of a ruin. In this case, you see the walls of Salabeckett, how they match the walls of Corderie, and they were almost very, very compressed, the space. Some models dedicated to the light. That fragment what was explaining the Sala Beckett real situation upstairs in Barcelona. Some models walking here, waiting for you. So when you arrive in the Corderie, you will find that wall. You will enter through, hopefully, and then in the other side, you will find all this world, and as I said, the imaginarium of an architect, all what is necessary for this building to look like nothing happened. In fact, there's a lot of tests and doubts and crises and going back and forth that were all there from the original cooperative, the competition, all the tests, the lights, the tiles, the windows, all the colors, all the pavements, all the letters, everything. Nobody failed to the place. You could go faster or slower. You could see all the drawings, all the process, even the templates of the letters in the corner of Sala Beckett, which is welcoming you. Well, talking you about a corner, there is the bar, you get closer, you see some action in there, so it's a ruin, but it's activated, you see that the building is in action again. And to finish, one of the first actions that when Sala Beckett took over the building was about this, one of the professors, one of the playwrights of the group of Sala Beckett, who with his students, he invited all the neighbors who were around in the neighborhood who wanted to come and explain stories about their experience in the cooperative. So they were invited during 3 consecutive Saturdays to explain the students' stories, their own stories of our lives there, and the students taking notes. And 3 months later, they invited them back, all the neighbors, and they represented in 15 different places in the building different scenes or different stories, different fictions out of the original stories. So there were things in the bar, there were everywhere. So all this drawing that we have drawn many years before, imagining or hoping that the building was not going to be only with theater in the theater spaces, but all around. The drawing is called Theater All Around because we thought not just the 2 or 3 spaces for theater actions would happen. All the buildings should be full of theater. It was going on because the actors were in the vestibule, in the bar, were in the dressing rooms, in the courtyard. Everything was filled with theater all in the building, and they were dancing. People was crying because they were, coming back. And in that moment, the cafe became a cafe again. In that moment, we were knowing that we had done this, community with the different times and the different lives that the building have passed through. And it's when the speaker says, attention, attention, the show is going to start.
Atenció, la funció és a punt de començar. Un escenari de cartró que va quedar dipositat davant teu damunt les flaçades. Tenia el taló caigut i et van invitar que tu mateix l'aixequessis. I així vas descobrir, tal com nosaltres ho descobrim ara, tot un univers de rompiments i talons pintats, el mar i el cel, un paisatge infinit dins d'una capsa. Quantitat de personatges habitaven aquell àmbit, hieràtics, però movibles gràcies a unes tiges de cartró hores. Per primera vegada. Un moment abans de decidir-te, un moment abans de donar l'ordre, contemplaves l'escenari com ho tornes a fer ara i resolies que tot aquell bullit incipient de formes, figures i colors podia ser la cosa més bonica del món. I és així com et vas perdre, perquè t'havies ficat massa endins. I quan el taló es va tancar, com ho fa ara, es va tancar darrere teu.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for this really wonderful, beautiful lecture. Thanks so much. Let me now first introduce our respondent for tonight, Wilfried Kühn. He is partner at the architectural firm Kühn-Malvezzi in Berlin and professor here in Vienna at the University of Technology, professor for spatial design. And he's also board member of the Vienna Secession. He curated, among others, the exhibition Carlo Molino, together with the photographer Armin Linke at Haus der Kunst in Munich. He also did an exhibition on Hans Hollein here at the MAC, together with Marlies Wirth. And a very important exhibition, also Wohnungsfrage at the Haus der Kulturen in Berlin, together with Jesko Feser, Nikolaus Hirsch and Hila Pelek, centering especially on cooperatives, which of course connects very nicely to what we have just seen. With Kühn-Malvezzi, he built art projects like the extension of the Hamburger Bahnhof and the Julia Stoschek collection in Düsseldorf. At the moment, they are just working on something named the Insectarium, something I've never heard before, in Montreal, which is expected to open in 2022. It's a museum for insects and biodiversity, and they are also working since many, many years, I think, on the House of One, and it seems that it's now really under construction, if I get that right, which also connects very nicely to the chapel we have just seen. So it's a house for, it's a church and a mosque and a synagogue under one roof. And very recently, together with local partners, they won the international competition for social housing for 180 flats at the site of a former hospital in Paris. So also we have the social housing parts also in here. And he also Kühn-Malvezzi took part in many, many exhibitions, be it the Manifesta, the Venice Biennale, the Chicago Architecture Biennale, and the Lisbon Triennale. But I would now like to invite you, Wilfried, to react to what we have just seen and to connect it to your work and maybe also to the different contexts, be it Berlin or especially Vienna. And I know you have been here for some time and you're a very sharp observer. So, please.
Is it? Can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for the beautiful lecture and basically taking us into these projects in a very experiential way, I would say. So I really had the feeling I was there for a moment and again in another situation. So that is also as a way of presenting architecture quite interesting, I find, because you use this moving through the spaces in the way you showed it. That's something very, very beautiful. It's very exhibition-like, very theatrical, of course, also, and it gives you the idea that architecture is not an object. It's not an object in space only, but it's more really a spatial experience, sequences, neighboring things happening, and I have to say I find this this method very very inspiring. I would like to enter the discourse maybe with a question that is a little bit somehow trying to make it, kind of make a relation to the IBA in Vienna, which I don't even know much about, I have to admit, because I'm not part of it, and I'm here in Vienna not in any function related to the IBA, so I'm also curious to know more about it, of course, but what is typical of a social housing project or a project of housing in general, and IBA especially I think has this theme, is that you build a new quarter, you go into new areas of town, you expand the city. We heard before that the city is growing like crazy, and we heard that basically you have to build in a very short time so much that Kurt Hofstetter was saying you already think when you're now in the last phase, you almost would actually do things differently, or not almost, you would definitely do differently if you could, but you have to also finish what you have been doing. So there's a strange kind of component of time friction here. And that we all experience all the time. We experience in every project. The project needs to finish, and then it also needs to be done, and then you have to move on. You cannot just go do an endless project. But at the same time of a project is also the time after you have finished it. So there's always this problem with housing, I find, that You basically create something, and then it has to actually be finished by the people inhabiting it after you have finished your time as an architect. And you have to anticipate that, but you cannot plan that. And if you try to plan it, it goes all wrong, because you cannot play life. Life needs its own freedoms. So I would like to understand, from also considering your kind of very sensitive practices of showing life in your presentation, how do you anticipate life in your buildings in the moment you plan it? And how do you feel about what's happening afterwards? How do you deal with especially the fact that this is now an old building, but transport that to a new situation where you have not so much existing materials, existing things that you can rely on for your imagination? How do you, in a place like your new building you were showing first, anticipate life in that case? Also very practically in your work, in the studio.
Yes, well, but as you said, you cannot anticipate, of course, but you are also aware that what you will decide to be built can have an effect. And sometimes you don't know what will be this effect, but more or less, okay, you think, okay, let's try to control the situation as much as we can, and then let's try to provoke things that we want to maybe to happen, if it's possible. So in the case of the housing, what we really were concerned was about this, how to make them meet and how you are aware of who's living next to you. And so because, well, I don't know, usually in Spain it's very common that you talk for a moment on the staircase and you know about the kids and what they are studying or whatever is going on, but you are not friends, no? But you know, so you know just a little to know that if someday you need something, you will call this person, no? There's these little links that you make, and sometimes it can happen that they become friends, or you become friends with neighbors. So this was kind of our main subject, I think, when we were drawing this. And this is what also we thought it would be very disappointing that when we add housings, we don't get anything for the city or anything out of it, that it's not just the housing. Something like the first building that we saw is on the public square. It has a shape, a circular shape, and has a symmetrical one at the other side of the very main street. So they are shaping a kind of an entrance, kind of monumentary entrance to the city. But to the space on the ground floor, it didn't really kind of work that well. Also because in our case we have this shadow in winter that was not so good. And we really wanted to work this connection. So you are aware of things that you want to provoke. Then you never know. That's what also we came back, because it's such a big responsibility, you know? And now you have 108 houses, such a big number, and you don't know who's going to live there. You have an idea, you walk the area, you see other people know where they look like they are coming from which country or what's going on, but the people then, they will visit the building, and if they are interested, they are in a list, you have to have a certain income, they are interested, they will go into this building, but they don't know each other. That's the impressive thing. And they arrive at more or less at the same time. And so there is this curiosity, who's living where. So I think the first year it worked very much also by curiosity, and they make these acquaintances. So, but it's true, we cannot control life, but you have a few things that you go for.
How long is the building there now?
Now already 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you have been back there.
Yeah, many times, yes.
So. Did something change after you left, so to speak? Also, like, did people intervene into the spaces and change things, or try to?
No, not really. No, but what happens is that they did a group for bingo parties. You know bingo? What is it? You know, this lottery thing that they Saturday nights, and then then we discovered that, and they invited us into summer Saturday. So we went with our car there, and it was full of neighbors in the courtyard making. Somehow they were bringing chairs and tables and something to eat, and the bingo, of course, and all that, and they were making friends among them. So we were very happy that it happened. But then in that moment they were saying us all what they liked and what they didn't like. And there were many things that they were not agreeing, but they tell you straightforward, and it's very useful, because then you learn. Because of course, as you know, you imagine, you make the houses for yourself, like if it was for you, the best you could do. For example, the thing Eva was explaining, opening up the kitchen, and there are some countries like these ones that is not a new thing. But for Spain, for social housing in Spain, it's a new thing. It's like a kind of a revolutionary thing, opening the kitchen, you know. But then you do it, and then you provoke that. But then lots of people was against, but from our generation, or younger generation even, no, I'm not talking about, you know, old. So you fell in the half of the houses, 50% of the time, even if you are thinking the best for everything. So yeah, that's a bit the lesson, no? You imagine and you try to do, you know, things that you think that are the best, and still you are failing many times because you don't know the neighbors beforehand.
But in your opinion, is it more the fact that the neighbors somehow have to get used to this new somehow space they're not used to because they grew up in different circumstances, and now maybe living in an open kitchen for 10 years, they might actually like what they couldn't imagine before? Or is it that you, in the next project, if you do a project like this, you would actually do 50% of the apartments with closed kitchens because you anticipate that there are people and people, and you just don't want to be so absolutist about it. What is your opinion?
No, well, I think in social housing, in my opinion, is where experimentation in housing has to be. Is where you have to test new ways of living, and then there is where you have to try this. And then if there are people who doesn't share and understand, of course, they are in their rights. But I think we would always do what we think the now moment needs or the future moment needs. Now, what's a family anymore? What is a family of what and what, or which kind of gender and all that. So I think these ways are what in social housing, which is subsidized, is where we think we have to experiment and try. And so we will always do that again, or I mean, in the moment it takes. Yeah. So, in my opinion.
And do you think one could, with easy means, basically change, for instance, a kitchen like this now, taking drywall and making a wall?
Yeah, they could. Yes, if they own, because some are rented and some are owned. If they own, yes, they of course they can. Yes, they can do, and yeah, it's not so complicated. Yeah. You need to follow up and then make a door, and you do. But I think most of the people have accepted the challenge. Mm-hmm. And also what happens is that Eva was showing a model of Sola Morales with many other blocks. And what happened with that is that each of the designers proposed a different way of houses. That was very rich because it was proposing many different ways of living. It was a nightmare for the municipality, of course, to handle all that. But it was very rich for the ensemble. So you could decide, no, I don't like this kind of, kitchen or core. I want to go to the other block if you don't share, So you can decide, instead of getting in and changing it all, you could decide to change block beforehand and go to another place.
But also the apartment had this bedroom that was open, and we call it studio bedroom. They could close it. It was like, I think at the moment it was like 300 euros, and then you can close the door, can close it and fix the door. So in the apartment, there was already this idea that you could modify things. So it can happen that they can close the window if they are in the kitchen, if they are interested. But yeah, somehow it's true that everyone does know what you think. Okay, let's. You have an idea, and even in the house, you think, okay, we work so much in the house. This idea of home sweet home. You think, what? I mean, and to move the house, to keep the house moving, it's not sweet. I mean, it's as work as in the office, no? So everyone, I think, and probably it's amazing, for people that 111 units is designed by a team, that can discuss, and there is other people involved. But somehow we do it like this, and unless you have the people who's going to live there from the very beginning, like in the cooperative, and then the program is worked out more with them. And then I think that's why sometimes you see these rich housings that come from cooperative, because the program has been so much worked out and density, so it's incredibly, I think there are incredibly rich examples of collective housing. In this case, it's true, it's kind of simplistic in a way you think of it, but it's what Ricardo was saying, we will give every time what we think or what we understand, we can propose.
Yeah. I mean, the question how the resistance in time of or the resilience of a building like this is also to be proved after 100 years and not after 10 years, of course, and we don't know yet. For me, it's very striking that a building like Robin Hood Gardens in London has been torn down. A building that we visited as architects and as students several times, and that we always very much liked, and that we always felt like it was a great not only an experiment, but a great contribution to modern and contemporary architecture. But Ellison and Peter Smith, and for sure, when they did it, had not only the very best intentions, but also the feeling that they were really offering something new with the streets in the air. They were offering somehow a new reality of social housing to be appropriated, as you say, a challenge for the people. And instead of accepting this challenge in the long run, now at a certain point society takes these things down. And
is this really because of the spatial challenge, or is it because of land speculation?
It comes together, I think, but it couldn't happen. The land speculation couldn't happen if everyone in that building was so identified with it that they would somehow say, we want to stay here and like this. Then you have kind of like a big outcry. But people were not so identified. So then it was easy for the speculators to take it down and say, people are unhappy, we have to take it down. And if you go, I went last year to Rozzol Melara in Trieste, this big quadrilatero, which is this enormous brutalist building from the late 60s and 70s. And what was interesting and striking for me is to see again that everywhere where social spaces were planned, and they're huge, no one was there, just garbage. Everywhere where car spaces were planned, there were no cars. But everywhere where green spaces were planned were the cars. And everywhere where no social spaces were planned, people were smoking and sitting. So basically, people have different ideas of what to do with space than architects sometimes. And those architects were for sure not completely sick and wrong. But somehow the adaptability, let's say, the resilience in terms of being able to transform of that brutalist architecture sometimes is not so strong, not so high. And that's why I'm asking, can people intervene into the architecture? I'm a great fan of Évora, of Caesar's first, or not, it's not his first, it's a later social housing actually, it's like from the 70s, but late 70s, not early, or 80s. But what is interesting about it is that people could change it afterwards. It was built. So, do you think that that could be a way forward, that architecture is not finished in the moment it's built, that we let actually spaces to be opened for people to work with after 50 years or so, or after 20 years, I don't know.
Yeah, this is an option, but then it comes to my mind immediately, okay, but which spaces? Because one thing is the houses, but then the other thing is the common space, and how I think it has to be coordinated, always. It's more difficult. I mean, inside the house, it's more easy that, okay, let's adjust this and change things. And this is good. I think that the structure permits you, allows you to do this. But then when a building is proposing something for the whole of them, I think it's more difficult to change it, probably, and how it needs to be done, and it's a coordination. But, of course, I think usually architecture can evolve, and I think Robin Hood Gardens could have evolved. It's not, they were not interested, but maybe also, I think it happens also in the old town Barcelona when the people who inhabit knows that there are plans for it to be derelicted, that they don't take care of the buildings. And I think in Robin Hood there was something that they didn't, so you have a house where there was always a tap with dropping water and these kind of things that at the end you are kind of tired of it. So the deterioration of the houses doesn't help, because I think it's one of the tests of architecture. It's beautiful that it can be kind of reinterpreted and reused and changed. No? And
so, this is what you're talking about. But
thinking of Salah Beckett, you have Beckett. Basically, the whole principle is that things change. You take the tiles from one floor, you bring them to the other. You take the doors, you bring them here. Basically, that could be a principle for architecture also in terms of housing, maybe.
Yeah, well, that's the most interesting thing now, how to reuse things instead of demolishing them and reconverting them. But in the case of Salah Beckett, now that you take the director was very present in the whole process, telling us what he wanted. He representing the group, how they wanted to be working, and everything during 6 years, explaining, and then you would draw in with his help, and that's why the building fits very well what they are doing, and they are working. They are working very well there. But in the case of the social housing in Barcelona or in Spain, that you don't have the users beforehand, is a whole challenge, and you might fail a lot of times. And yeah, it's what you say is true. What we were interested in the case of the 111 building is that the neighbors could speak from side to side. We were obsessed by Rear Window, the film by Hitchcock, and then looking at it again and again, and then we found out the plans of the set that he built for the film. So we were measuring out and seeing the distance that James Stewart had with the neighbors, and where he could hear a bit, not much. So this limit between the promiscuity and privacy, which is it? So you want them to talk to them if they wanted, but at the same time, if they didn't want, they have their own privacy. So this was, we had hundreds of models of that, and putting our head inside to see if that was going to work or not. All this obsession now is working, but of course, as you say, but I think that is one of the things that made the group work as a whole, as a block, because they feel like it's kind of a pot where everything goes together, and But
also it's not too closed. I think that's
exactly.
A very fascinating thing about this housing project, that it's the borders between privacy and public. So it really connects, it really creates something, which one can really call collectivity without kind of, still you have your privacy,
exactly.
but you have a lot of connection. I think it's not fluid, but it's very precise in a way. And you have a lot of options of semi-private, completely private, almost public, and
because there's a lot of people who doesn't want to socialize or be part. They want to be left alone, of course. So you need to have this in account as well. Not everyone has to be talking to each other in the balconies and all that. So
I'm not so sure if it would work in Austria or in Vienna in the same way as it works in Barcelona. Maybe
no, we like to talk
culture specific,
a lot. We are very talkative people, yes. And shout from balcony to balcony.
But talking about all these processes, like here again, like you were studying film sets, and of course the process with the Salak Beckett was incredibly extensive and intensive at the same time. You said something almost at the end of your lecture, all what is necessary to look like nothing has happened. A lot is necessary to make it look like nothing has happened. How do we do that economically?
Next
for yourself,
question, please.
As an architect?
It's not.
I don't know, Wilfried, can you imagine that it can work economically for an architectural office to work like that?
Because you invest a lot of energy without hours. Yeah, well, we kind of coined that for us ourselves this term invisible architecture, because sometimes the architecture is best when you don't see it, when you just feel it, when you feel a space, when you feel a life happening, but you don't think about all the great details and all the great sweat of the architect that has been invested, So this kind of elegance that you like. I'm also not such a great fan of show cooking when I go to a restaurant, because I'd rather prefer to not see all this happen, I'd rather enjoy the meal. And I don't really want to bother everyone with architecture. So in that sense, I understand that logic, as if nothing happened. I like that.
Because this was saying by the director. It says here you put everything upside down, and it was a lot of crisis economically and technically, and at the end seems like nothing happened here. And this was a very nice end for us, because the house is. When you enter there, it was like you're, in a way, this kind of, the grandmother's house, that you feel all these kind of spaces that are up there and that nobody have entered for time, and there are all these secrets close up there, and you don't want to open them up, and you want to keep them in the house. And then suddenly, of course, all the technical issues of this theater are very hard and tough, and you have to accomplish, of course, but then you want to keep everything like it was. And that is the most difficult thing in this kind of, because it's also because the building is very fragile, is not a rich building, in terms of material and that, so very fast you could really make the ghost vanish. Everything goes away, and then you have these places that are, not interesting. And this was, but the director was constantly telling us, try to keep everything in.
Coming back to that question of the user and the investor, basically this dichotomy, like when you have a social housing, usually you don't have the user, you just have the city or the I don't know, agency that runs the whole business. And basically, how do you anticipate the needs, and how do you develop a project together, knowing, as architects, for us it's so important to have someone to develop a project with. I mean, we don't sit in the atelier alone and think. No, we go to our clients, our vis-a-vis, and we talk, and together on the table we develop many things. And I think this is pretty clear what you said about this director. I could confirm with all my experiences in the museum field and also in the field now of the three religions, but also in sectarian, for instance. We had so many times, so many hours spent with the people who are so 100% focused on their things, because they're researchers or they're curators. They really love what they do, and so they want to talk about that all the time and develop with you together the thing. So designing the thing for the butterflies, we really spent all those hours together with these entomologists, and really designed every case, everything together. Now, for the Wohnungsfrage exhibition that you mentioned in Haus der Kulturen, our starting point was exactly that. We started actually from the fact that there was an IBA in Berlin it was proposed, should have happened, and it was cancelled.
The third IBA in Berlin.
It was cancelled. It was cancelled about 10 years ago, and that was 8 years ago. And that was exactly when we had we were commissioned this exhibition, asked by Jan Scherer, the director of the Haus der Kulturen, to make an exhibition on architecture. And we said, look, the IBA is missing, but let's make the IBA ourselves. What is an IBA about? What was so interesting about the IBA in Berlin in 87, for instance, that you had all these architects from everywhere in the world that actually worked with basically for local sites, local Wohnungsbaugenossenschaften or Bauträger. So somehow you had an exchange between local and international, between architects from somewhere and local agencies. Then we said, but the problem is always the real users are not there. You're missing the users. So basically then we said, let's set up the users. So then we went to students' organizations, Fachschaften und Vertretungen in Berlin, and asked them if they wanted to be the clients for a student housing, that we would build a one-to-one model in the exhibition, kind of like a mock-up, but usable. And we found a group of 8 or so, and they came together. We made the same with artists. We made the same with old folks. Found very interesting communities, existing communities in East Berlin, people who were actually close to eviction from their old house, and they really wanted to come together, and this was a political thing then. And these then we put together with international architects. So Bauwau then worked with the students, Assemble worked with the old folks. It was very interesting. They couldn't speak English. They could speak Russian, but they couldn't speak English. And now they became these young London hipsters. But it was interesting. They found an interesting way to discuss how do we want to live. And then they developed a model, for instance, where there was half rent and half buying. So the Assemble developed a project where together with these guys, where they would say we buy apartments that are very small, and then we have lots of other space that we can rent and also like not rent, like when we have a family, we rent 100 square meters more, and then when we are old and alone, we just stick with our 40 square meters nucleus. And so basically they developed these flexible models also in usership, in ownership, and all the questions came up. Financialization, how do you finance this whole thing, who brings the collateral, and so on. And I find that interesting, that actually as an architect, as a realist architect, and we are realists because we build, you want to have to do with all these things. You don't want to be secluded from all these processes. So my question to you would be, do you see models, or also could you speak about maybe other projects, because you were saying here it was not the case, where you actually have this kind of relationship to users of, like apartments, for instance, or do you have you worked with cooperatives, for instance?
No, in fact, in Building 111, there were no users. What there was is these meetings that the architect and urban planner Manuel Sola Morales organized in the municipality, regular meetings every 15 days at the beginning, and then maybe once a month, and it lasts like 1 year. That each team, there were like 5 teams of architects, were developing their houses, and then the technicians of the municipality were there, and they have an idea of what they wanted about the amount of houses and the size of them. So there was these sessions of work, but everyone was providing the houses that they, each team had different kind of houses in mind. Kind of one out of rooms, our was the one kind of more open, but Manuel Sola Morales also himself was proposing other kind of very thin buildings in between the big city blocks. So there was all this variation, and we were discussing among us and what to do, and what about the toilet, what about the entrance. So there was comments on, but among us, there was no user. So everyone, when you draw, you see yourself as the user. So you draw the house that think can work for you. Thinking that, okay, you're providing it for others, but I mean, it's the only thing that kind of, you can be honest, but you don't know, but at least it's something that I will live here, and this is what suits me.
It was like a kind of a workshop situation for a few months. Very interesting because, we were like, discussing or criticizing others, like in the school, criticizing, why the staircases, you put it in here or there, how you enter, how you not, chimneys, how they end up, etc. Many. For us was great because we were the younger team and we were learning from, very experienced and people we admire a lot, and we were valued by them, and by comparison we could also work. For example, the houses that Eva showed, all the social part of the houses were related to the courtyard. Instead of being solar oriented by sun, was oriented by the social thing, because we wanted people to talk. So all the kitchens and dining rooms and the TV and all that was to the courtyard. So when you enter, you hear the dishes and the TV and the smell and all these things that, and then the bedrooms are outside. In the next one block, someone was saying, no, I put this to the east and this to the west and all that. But we thought, in our courtyard, we don't want that someone in the living room sees the other one with the pajamas in the bedroom, all this kind of, because you like to gossip a lot in Spain, and so you will immediately look at the other neighbors. So, all these discussions by comparison, allowed us to position our housing. But as you say, of course, it's all a guessing. It's a big guessing thing, and
I have another question regarding typology. I mean, now we saw Sala Beckett and we saw the housing. But if we look at our historical cities that we like so much, and you showed in the very beginning the reference pictures of successful square, and we think of the houses that are there and how they are being used. I would say they are successful also because mostly what's happening on the ground floor and on the maybe first floor is different from what's happening on the third and fourth floor, and maybe even on the fifth floor. So maybe you have real mixed use. You have shops, then you have maybe people working in maybe lawyers or dentists or architects in some floors, and then you have maybe above, you have like houses. Mm-hmm. And that works. It works very well because you have a day and night cycle and all of this. In these new housing projects, you rarely have this kind of mixed use. You don't have a Sala Beckett in the first 3 floors of a housing like that.
No, but you have shops, you have a commercial we haven't shown it in detail, but it has a commercial, the first 2 levels is commercial. It's a very high ground floor level, because there's...
But facing the city.
Yeah, facing the city.
And then facing the landscape.
Yeah. No, go.
We had 8 units that have a workshop related to them. It was interesting, and we thought, and also it was a discussion among the different teams, where you place it, and we thought about having them more near the landscape so that the little bands can come and pick up a furniture in case it was a carpenter. So we place them where you have more open space, and even maybe they can work some things outside in the street some days. But so there was already this combination of working and staying.
And it's
at
there.
home.
It's
there.
Is there?
And it's rented out, so it's used.
Everything
Yes.
is rented
Yes.
out. And what is interesting is that this, because the landscape is is an inclined landscape. The ground floor of the shops are very high, so in a way, you have all the pine trees in the front coming through, connected with the courtyard somehow, because it's very tall. And then you see the landscape going through the building. And it's, as you say, it's very interesting because it's very high, and so you have a kind of cushion between the living world and the more common world, and it's kind of in between scale, which is very necessary. It's true, and it's not housing there, and it's something else and something else. We expected that the kindergarten or something would happen there. It didn't work. It's difficult. Yeah, the area maybe one day, but not yet. It would be very nice because they could go to the park and etc. through. But yeah.
I would like now to give also you the opportunity to join the discussion, if there are any comments and questions. Lorenzo? There's the mic over there, sorry. It's the COVID mic.
Yeah. Hello, so my name is Lorenzo de Schiffer, and thank you very much for a wonderful lecture and also a super interesting discussion. I heard in the introduction, or we were told that you teach in Spain and in Switzerland, and did I understand right, also in Australia? And I was wondering if you could talk a bit about how you teach in general, and also the comparison between these three very different places, and how you change your approach depending on where you teach.
Well, the Australian thing is something we do, and the Australian students come to Barcelona once, so we make a kind of Barcelona team related to RMIT, university in Melbourne. So they have some places around the world, and we run the Barcelona studio. So it's not, we don't move over there. But the thing in Barcelona and Zurich has relations because we've been working in areas of the city, first in Barcelona, now more in Zurich, that are for some reason, planning or whatever reason, have been destroyed or demolished some parts, but there are still some neighbors around or some fragments of buildings still there. And we propose the students, the studio is called Building Communities, and we propose the students to bring in new neighbors, but also some common program, like a civic center or a little theater or something that could also help to build a community. But the challenge or the proposal is that they count with existing neighbors as well, and with existing buildings as well. So the building of community should be done between new neighbors and existing neighbors, because the existing neighbors will help the new neighbors with all the amounts of connections and things that have happened there in the neighborhood before. So when the newcomers, the new neighbors arrive, they don't land to a place where there's nothing, but there's some neighbors that can help them, to build. So in a way, they have to sue again, to connect again the neighbors that have remained a bit, displaced by the demolitions with the new neighbors, and also using existing buildings for the new houses. So they build a community between new and old neighbors and between new and old buildings. So in a way, it's this issue of taking care of the people to living together, but also of the buildings that are remain there and all the memories that can help the community to build on that memory. So it's an exercise that goes into different scales, from urban into the house. They end up proposing some dwellings. There's a moment when they go out in the area and they interview some neighbors by chance, so to have a bit of an idea of the social profile they are working with. So later on, when we have to draw the houses they dedicate, in a way they have the memories of these people that they met, so they are not drawing to themselves but to someone real. So they go into the different scales, the urban scale, the intermediate scales, the moment where you meet someone, as we said before, and then until your house, and how all this long change between the city and your house is also your house. That your house is not only the place where you live, but the tree, the cafe, everything is also yours, because when you choose that, it's also part of your house. So you are, as an architect, you have the responsibility to deal with that. And well, this is a bit.
So very much what we bring into the academic has very much to do with what we have explained today. So it's related to this connection of complementary between public space and private spaces and reuse. So we work in cities, we make kind of urban rehabilitation, and the program is collective housing and this other kind of space that will provide a bigger room for a bigger community. That it can be a theater, sometimes it's a gym, sometimes it's a cooking school, or...
Thank you for
Oui, kort.
What struck me, Ricardo, when you started in the beginning, you said in social housing, when it's subsidized, you need to experiment and to try. And I was thinking about it, and I have my answer, but I would be interested in why, in your answer. Why do you say in subsidized housing you should experiment and try?
Well, because I think it's this with public money that you need to use it for proposing new ways of living. Probably private investors wouldn't allow you to test so much. And but instead, the public housing should be the way where you incorporate new ways of living and new ways of living together. And in my opinion, and you are more free to test. I'm sure that real estate investors wouldn't try so much, allow or be so happy to try so much. This was. I don't know if you agree. All right. Okay. Good.
You mean it was happening or it's still happening?
That is what is happening.
Yeah, it is happening.
But we have to admit that not necessarily is social housing more avant-garde than private housing. We also have to admit that some private investors actually take risks and create new markets by also making new and open floor plans, for instance, which is also easy when you sell to people who are culturally somehow so well chosen that you know exactly what you do for them. Whereas in social housing you have to work for everyone, and that's much more difficult. But not all the Bauträger, especially, or the public housing companies, are so keen on experimentation that they would tell you carte blanche, just try something new. My experience with social housing especially is that they come with extremely detailed requests of how many rooms, how many square meters, which materials, which doors, cost. And if you add up all these things, that idea of spending public money on experimentation seems like a joke, honestly. So I have to say that would be the condition. I agree with you. It should be the condition. But I don't think that in general we work under that condition.
Yeah. No, that is true. The situation here in the 111 building also, the situation that Manuel Sola Morales was involved helped a lot in convincing or persuading the municipality or the public authority that this had to be, a place where new ways of living should be tried and tested. And also as an example for private investors, because this was 2004, 5, 6, where in Spain was built, everything that was built was sold immediately. So the private investors were doing whatever, and it was fine. So the role of the administration in this case was to say you could do also house of quality, social housing, and be in market also. You don't need to make bad things. So in a way, yeah, it's of course, as you say, is very variable on the administration, on the moment. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, and there is even a critique of, like, some people say there shouldn't be any experiments in social housing because the people living there in the future, they are not like the rats in the laboratory. So it's, of course, in modern architecture, modernism has been full of these experiments in social housing of kind of training people for the right life. And so I think it's a very interesting topic, how far you should go or could go.
Yes, I think, but yeah, because when you think experimenting, but I think it's like you think. I think then it becomes, if there is not a client, what I was telling before, kind of personal. But you draw something, you think it will work, so it's an experiment. But that, I mean, the thing is that the person who's drawing it, can be able to live there. And in fact, when we finished the building, Ricardo wanted to go there and living, but I thought
she
that
didn't allow us.
Because I thought that as architects, what probably we know it's about the plumbing and all this. So I imagine every morning crossing the courtyard and someone calling me from a balcony, hey, Eva, my kitchen is not working. I imagine I will be like this because it's the way that you are understood. So I was thinking, oh my God,
having our office there, I thought it was a great idea. Our office and house in this kind of workshop houses. I thought it was great.
Yeah. No water today. I imagine that.
Yeah, well, maybe, but I thought it was a good idea anyway.
Any more questions from your side? Yeah, please.
After seeing like all this really like specific and like intense models, and also what you did with the models and with the videos, and like from studying architecture, and because of COVID we also had to do like a lot of videos and integrate the models and videos. I wanted to ask, like, what is your approach to the models? Like, is it a tool for you also in designing, or is it just for presentation, or how do you approach your models? How is your approach to these practices?
Yeah, well, we use a lot of models, as you have seen, and then we use them for films. But we draw, and then the model is a test. Usually, sometimes we start also with modeling the city around. So usually there are urban models, and then we test the size of our building in relation to the neighborhood. Then we come into making some fragments, so we go in zooming into the one special room of the building or something, or the vestibule. So they are fragmented when they get in bigger scale, but we use them in all the scales. But they come always after a drawing. So we don't kind of design, or we don't accept kind of casualties, or we draw because we think it's more synthetic. And then after we test them, and it's very much, the models help us a lot in a scale of things. If it's too big or too small, that it's something that as an architect, it's like one of the concerns, I'm gonna be too reduced here. So also the proportions in between rooms, then this is really, really helpful. And then when you start building, the building looks very much like the models, you're kind of surprised. So it's very much testing. And then we use them to talk with the clients. So it's a tool to communicate. And we build them in our studio. So they are always processed. A lot of them are unfinished because they are built as far as the conversation needed. There are some parts that never get built in the model. They are fragments, like this one in Sala Beckett is mainly the vestibule. We start with the vestibule. Then we had some of the rooms the main room, we have it in 1 to 20. But it's because, the director also, the people of theater are used to look at models for scenography in 1 to 20. So he could put the head inside and think, okay, the proportion will work for me. But it's testing and talking with the clients a lot. And then we use them with the films to explain them after. Mainly all these films are made afterwards, when the project is finished, sometimes in the middle, but usually it's afterwards, as a way of when we have to explain the project, like today, then we make these films.
Also, the models are very useful for the site construction many times, because the builder, of course, he will go with the plans, but when he sees the model, he has an idea of what you want, and then he continues with the plan, with the drawings all the time. But we found very useful to communicate, as Eva was saying, with the client, also with the builder, with the collaborators, with engineers. It's a tool which incorporates many eyes, and in a way makes more public your thoughts, in a way, because it comes out of your office, and people who is not an architect can participate in a model very easily. So it's a very useful, and then it takes all the scales from the very beginning to the end, and as I said, goes to the construction, and then then you can use it for later, but mainly it's a working thing. But it's very important to see what you are doing. If you can look and put in the eye of the viewer, of the people who walks and whatever, and then to make you sure that you are doing what you like or what you don't like, or etc., and to move on with your drawings. Because only with drawings sometimes we feel like we lack, this, and then you keep it there in your table and you continue drawing to move on. But sometimes otherwise you feel like you need something to get sure of that step to move to the new one, like you do at school.
Ricardo, talking about bringing the models to the construction site, I can especially imagine the Sala Beckett construction site. It must have been really complicated to communicate with some workers or some craftspeople, like what they ought to do and where they ought to stop, because I think there are a lot of things normally you think, oh, I have to finish this, but no, they should not finish it. And how difficult was this process?
Was also difficult for us to know where to finish. Because we were, in that moment, we were looking sometimes on the walls, and we were adopting, and the painting was the last thing that came, and the builder was saying, we want the paintings. And we said, yes, next week, and the next, and the painters were there. Where should I stop painting? And all this kind of crisis of the touching the walls. And we were reacting a lot in the moment. And that was something we were inside all the time with some, drawings and indicating room by room with marks and with tape and until here with that color and all that. It was the color thing and the finishing was the most complicated even for us.
Yes, but also not Angelica. It was difficult to just paint until here. So we had pictures of the room as it was, and we paint on top of it in transparent paper. And then we scan it, and these photographs were in each room, and with the codes of each color. So it was the guiding for the painters. But yeah, for them it was like, what is this, no? I don't know if it was good luck because they paint half of the room or less, or it was bad luck because the work was very short and they have to move around the whole building. But the painters were kind of, I suppose they would make a lot of jokes in the breakfast moment about it.
Any more questions from your side? If not, I would finish this very nice evening at this point, and I would really like to thank you for this wonderful lecture, and to thank you, Wilfried, for being the respondent tonight. If you go to Barcelona in the near future, you know where to go and where to have a tortilla, I think. And I can really recommend it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.